Hi, everybody. Welcome to our World Kombucha Day celebration. I am so excited to introduce Ian Griffin. He's a dear friend and a longtime customer of Kombucha Camp, as well as a publishing partner for Symbiosis Magazine. And just really excited to have you here today to talk about kombucha. So, why don't we start at the beginning? How did you first hear about kombucha, Ian?
Well, thanks, Hannah. Yeah, it goes back 15 years about. I was at a point in my life where I gave up alcohol. I have to tell everybody I'm not a member of AA. I just, used to do an annual fast and I clear my diet up of caffeine and alcohol. And I just never got back into it. And I got very sick of Calistoga water and pineapple juice as options. And I found, like many people, GT's Gingerade in the cooler at Whole Foods. And it was love at first sip. I thought, oh my goodness, this is alcoholic. It's incredible, and there's other flavors. But I started drinking pretty quickly, at least a bottle a day, a case a week. And after a month, I realized I'm spending 120 bucks a month on kombucha. So I wasn't really, I'd never, made homemade cheese or kefir or anything like this before, but I did find Kombucha Camp, and you were very kind, very efficiently sent me the ceramic continuous brew container. I still got it with another few now downstairs. I've been brewing pretty much consistently, except when I travel, and I've learned how to let the starter liquid get sour and kickstart it again. And yeah, I have anywhere between 2 and 6 gallons a day. A time, 10-day ferments. I give a lot away. And I usually drink it unflavored, but I throw lavender flowers in sometime and drink a pint at lunch and a pint at dinner. And who'd know I'm 100 years old, right?
I love that
So,
story. Yeah, and I think it's so interesting right now because we see this trend of a sort of self-imposed prohibition where many people are following your lead, where they're letting dry January spin over into the rest of the months of the year. And that's led to this really interesting explosion of alcohol-like, non-alcoholic beverages. But kombucha is kind of an OG in this space, meaning it's been around for a long time. And many
mhm.
folks, whether it's by choice or by necessity, in terms of letting go of alcohol, have found that kombucha does fill this great, delicious, complex flavors, um, craveable, and also, of course, makes you just feel fantastic. So I love that you're ahead of the trend, Ian, and that you've already found it to be a great substitute. And but you have what? Tell us about Booch News. How did that get started?
Well, yeah. So I came out of, I mean, I am in my 70s. I joked a minute ago. I just turned 72, February 2nd, Groundhog Day.
Oh,
So
happy birthday!
thank you. So, you mentioned alcohol light, and one of my early posts, I'll talk a minute about how I started Booch News, but there was a front page story in the London Times that 35% of all millennials don't drink alcohol, and it is a growing trend. I think, I'm at the other end of the generations, but certainly younger people. My daughter's 34, and she's very light drinker, and as is my son. So yes, so I came out of a career in the high tech industry in marketing, and again, like 20 years ago, I'd started blogging and podcasting to do with my job at the time. I was a speechwriter in high tech. And I used to go to public speaking meetings with a group called the National Speakers Association. And I'd been blogging about that, my career, kind of associated topics. So when I retired 5 years ago, I took a trip back to my home country, Britain, England, and it was the first time since I left in the early 80s that I'd been back for more than like 10 days on vacation, because now I had as much time as I wanted. And I traveled around Britain from, London to Bristol, Liverpool, Manchester, and I was craving kombucha because I'd been drinking it. And I could hardly find any in the stores. There were a couple of stores where I found it, but it wasn't like here where every Safeway has got a big cooler filled with it. So I thought, well, I'll just create a blog. I knew how to do it in a heartbeat with WordPress. Called it Booch News. Found boochnews.com was available as a URL. And if you go back to my first postings, you can scroll back by months. It was about a trip report around Britain, what I found. And then I also discovered surprisingly, because even back then, kombucha was, $1 billion+ industry worldwide. And today it's, who knows, $4 or $5 billion plus. And there didn't seem to be anybody writing about it. And I always say to people, in any other industry like nursing, trucking, there's nursing today, modern trucker, whatever, publications, and of course there was KBI as a trade association, which I found out about. But my blog by default became, there was no competition. And it wasn't that I was looking to create a publishing empire. I don't charge. I don't, I'm retired. I've done my career, so I get my got my investment, so I don't need to make money from it. But it's an extension into both my love of kombucha for myself and my belief, maybe like you, Hannah, that this is going to change the world, and we need to start telling people about it. And I aimed it at the industry, so I did sort of toss up for 5 minutes the idea: should I do like a wine spectator blog where I evaluate commercial brands and say, oh, this is a 5, or wine spectator say this is a 91 or a 96. But my own taste buds, because I brew my own, and I'd had some pretty sour brews that I'd gotten used to. I didn't deliberately do it, but I don't like to throw it away. And it made a lot of commercial kombucha. It's very light, a lot of it, and I couldn't distinguish really. So I didn't pursue that idea. I thought, no, I can write about, I've been in the industry in high tech, and I could write about, now I've never run a brewery. I don't know, I know it's hard work, and I know a lot of people put their life and soul into it. And I totally admire them. And, there's all kinds. There's GT, who's a billionaire, and there's a lot of struggling ma and pa operations who produce really good kombucha, very maybe just available at a few farmers markets. And that we can go on to talk about how I've, combined my retirement travel by, also checking up on kombucha in Spain, France, Britain, Ireland, Mexico. So I'm
Greece.
a bit of a, world traveler about that.
Yeah, and I love that you've gone global with it, because while, the commercial industry started here in the United States in 1995 when GT sold his first case to Erewhon, oh so many years
Mm-hmm.
ago. The United States, and in fact Los Angeles, is still the city that produces the most kombucha in the world, just by the
Mm-hmm.
fact of GT having over 50% of the market share. Health Aid is also based here. So is Kavita, right? So those are 3 national brands that are all based in Southern California. We truly are the capital of kombucha. And so living here, it sometimes feels like, oh, everybody knows about kombucha. But then you go traveling around the world and you see like, kombu what are you talking about? This is so weird. Or, oh, my grandma made that. Or, oh, I
Mm-hmm.
remember drinking that as a little kid because, the ancestors were doing it, right? And so to now see it emerge as this commercial beverage on the global scene. And, Alex and I founded Kombucha Brewers International as an outgrowth of our mission at Kombucha Camp, which is changing the world one gut at a time. So we definitely share that same passion, Ian, in wanting to do that. And then I believe did you reach out to me? Did you want to attend Kombucha Con? How did we get Symbiosis Magazine launched? Because that is the co-publication or our collaboration that we've worked on together as well.
Yeah, well, again, going back to my high tech days, I'd worked for Hewlett Packard, and I'd actually produced a couple of magazines, because basically I won't go into all the technology, but Hewlett Packard created a technology called MagCloud, like magazines in the cloud. They've since sold it, but it's available for pretty much any PDF, whether it's a PDF of wedding photographs or your child's graduation, can be produced as a magazine or booklet, like some photo publication, online photo things do. And so I knew it was relatively, so I was thinking, okay, I've got this blog, and I could also, take the content and put it in a magazine. And I think by that time, I got my copy of the Big Book of Kombucha, of course, and I'd been buying you. I knew you were a key and KBI. So I think I reached out saying, hey, you must know people who could maybe advertise. And I think it was coincidental that at the time, KBI was thinking of publishing hard copy. So we created Symbiosis between, KBI being the official magazine, and I was kind of the volunteer editor. Other people were involved to do the graphics design. Um, and I liked it because I always say that right now everything's online. Who knows in 100 years if the internet will still be around, or if maybe I won't pay my heirs won't pay my GoDaddy fee to keep Booch News alive. So something like this is it's printed, so it can be archived, and also it's what I like about MagCloud is it's evergreen. So it means those online PDFs anybody can order any one of the 6 or 7 or 8 editions that we've published.
Yes.
And it's got some wonderful. We've had some real heavy duty contributors. Thierry Than from France, who put a series on biochemistry of fermenting. We've got some profiles of different KBI members and
Well,
all
yeah, we
kinds of.
created all these great features. So we always wanted to have a profile of a member as well as either a woman or minority owned business, highlighting the diversity in our industry. We also always had a science section. And then you contributed many wonderful, leading articles, whether that was about cans or about, looking at the statistics of how many brands exist in the
Mhm.
world. And you update that on the regular basis on your blog. And, you know, uh, right, there's been some evolution and change and the pandemic and this and that, so we don't have any issues currently forthcoming for publication. However, I do anticipate that Symbiosis will resurrect and
Yeah.
continue to live, and of course you still have a passion for reporting. But let's go back to some of your travels around the world and how you've been able to um, just first of all, you love to travel, and then what you're seeing as you're going to these places. So 5 years ago, there was no kombucha in the UK that you could find, or maybe just a couple brands. What are you seeing now when you go on your international journeys?
Yeah, well, taking my home country, Britain, England, I grew up in the north of England. And in fact, I did a series of all kombucha companies I could find. And I do have a worldwide directory, over 2,000 brands. And this is pretty much, I find at home when I go on Instagram and Facebook, and I just follow, I search for hashtag kombucha and find them. And I add them to the directory, provided they've got a commercial looking label. It doesn't include home brewers who, like me, I just reuse empty, water bottles or whatever. Yeah, so back in England, I would say in 5 6 years ago there was probably 30 brands. There's now I think just around 100, and it's like in the US. There's one or two, would have a nationwide distribution. Equinox is one from Hebden Bridge in Yorkshire. There's Real Kombucha in London area. Jar Kombucha used to be a big brand. I think they moved to Belgium. And
Mhm.
like here, we've got Health AGT's, Hum, and then a lot of smaller. And so there are regional brands. I just did a feature I was actually over in Britain last September on a canal boat, which is a beautiful way to see the country. I'd never traveled by canal. I had a cousin who used to own one, and so I hired one. And I went through an area called Shropshire, which is on the Welsh borders. And there's a company called Shropshire Kombucha. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to, they mostly sell in farmers markets, but I was able to contact them on my return and do a profile and podcast recorded interview. So in Britain today, in Marks and Spencer's, which is the big home goods and food store, has just started carrying, or maybe they've already carried it, but they promoted some new flavors of kombucha on their Instagram. In Britain, I think it's going pretty well. It's really exploded, as you might know, in Spain,
Mm.
where I believe Kendra Sepulveda, who's now leading a KBI, is based in Barcelona. And there's been statistics out of Spain about how prevalent it is. But especially because I'm a tourist, when I traveled through, I was actually sailing with my brother-in-law down the coast of France, Spain, Portugal, and to the Mediterranean, which was fantastic. But we'd call into a small or even a larger town like Porto or Lisbon. And as a tourist, it was the same when I just got back from Mexico. You don't know where the little health food store might be, and the locals could know, oh, if I go to, this corner of the town. In many cases, it's so difficult. You're like searching out a hidden gem,
A
and
needle in a
and
haystack.
a needle in a haystack. Whereas in the US, I live in Vallejo, which is not a trendy town in the Bay Area. It's kind of an old shipbuilding, blue collar town in many senses. And the local Safeway, I've put pictures on Booch News. There's a whole chiller, 12-foot long, probably, it's got all the Cavita GTs, some local brands that's fully stocked. So anybody walking in, it's right near the door would see it. That's not the case outside the US, I don't believe, in any countries. Now, there are countries in Eastern Europe where some in the Middle East where there are two brands in the whole of, pick a country, or Africa. There's almost no kombucha. Um, Surprisingly enough, and you might know the reason behind this, is Brazil has the largest number of brands after the US. And I've forgotten his name. There's a guy who runs
Lucas.
Lucas. Yeah, he's got a very active kind of uh, workshop series and trained a lot of people to brew their own kombucha. And Brazil's geographically a huge area, but I've never really been there. But it sounds like they've got a booming kombucha scene, and I believe it's got gathering momentum. But my feeling when I went to England 5 years ago, it was like the US was 10 years before. So it's now catching up very quickly. And people are, learning to discern good kombucha from bad kombucha and distinguish. I always say to people, some people tell me, I'm sure they told you, that that's that famous kombucha face people make. Oh, I hate this stuff, and they never try it again. And I came to the US first to go to graduate school in the mid 70s, back when I did drink. And, I tried Gallo wine, a jug wine, in the box. And it was terrible, but it doesn't mean I was never going to drink wine again. I live near the Napa Valley, and now there is, there's been I've seen the Napa Valley grow with very elite kind of very distinguished wines that are produced, and it's the same with kombucha. There are some brands that really go beautiful. They use the high quality teas, and they might sell them unflavored. Real kombucha in the UK do that. I know they've teamed with Michelin-starred chefs. And it's an education, it's what you said a few minutes ago, it's one pallet at a time.
Well, and it's, like other products have become more sophisticated over time, right? Coffee is an example. We would all
Mhm,
have coffee granules, and that's how my
mhm,
grandparents made coffee. And now we
mhm.
seek out expensive glasses of cups of coffee in
Oh yeah.
from exotic locales and whatnot. Same with chocolate. So, well, like you're saying, kombucha, like all the finer things in life, is an acquired taste. And like these finer things, there's an element of fermentation to it, which creates these subtle, complex flavor profiles. And like any industry, it's going to continue to evolve. And in fact, at KBI, we initiated Kombucha Cup, where you've been a
Mhm.
judge. So you've been able to contribute your taste buds to helping to elevate the quality of kombucha in the world simply through the feedback you provide, and of course in your assistance in selecting winners. Obviously this is all anonymous and blind, but so yeah, that's another way in which you've also contributed to the industry in judging on the Kombucha Cup.
Yeah, I was very much the novice judge. You had some real experts there from the beer and wine, I think the beer industry, and flavor profile experts who guided us. But
It's
yeah, I
true,
mean,
but you also need
it,
someone who represents that, traditional homebrew flavor, because I think a lot of times, like you're saying, people want to go towards the softer flavor profiles. And my attitude, because as we both seen, there's a lot of infighting in the industry. My kombucha is purer than your kombucha, blah, blah, blah.
yeah,
The reality is there's a kombucha for everyone. We need more people drinking kombucha, regardless of whether that's a traditional raw,
yeah.
unpasteurized ferment, or if it's from concentrate, or if it is pasteurized, because all of these products are going to have the byproducts of fermentation, the organic acid. Sometimes they have the living organisms in them. And you are never going to get that from a soda. You're never going to get that from, some of these other functional beverages that are starting, they're just like filled with pills or whatnot. Um,
Mhm.
you know, Fermentation is this unique proposition, and kombucha encompasses all of these profiles. And I'm really eager and hopeful that when we can move beyond this sort of pointing fingers at each other in the industry, that we really have that unified front of like there is a kombucha for everyone. And as long as we're adhering to the code of practice, which enshrines fermentation as the key component to making a kombucha, along with some other things, that you know that then we can really all benefit from more and more people learning about kombucha. And I think even this trend we alluded to earlier of seeking out delicious, sophisticated, non-alcoholic beverages, kombucha is like perfectly primed to serve that niche as well.
Yeah, I agree totally. And I mentioned at the very beginning in passing that my first blog was on professional speaking and speech writing. And I was a member for 10 years of a group called the National Speakers Association. And this is interesting because they started back in the 70s when these are people who run workshops or deliver keynote speeches. And there's a number of people, quite a number, in 2000 in the US who make something of a living at that. You know, there's some superstars and there's some who just run workshops occasionally. But the founder of that, a guy called Cavett Robert, back in the day when professional speakers were kind of, trying to outbid each other for the limited jobs that would come up as conferences were held. And he said, rather than fighting with each other over a limited slice of the pie, we need to work together to make the pie bigger and bigger. And I think that's very appropriate and applicable because there's nowhere, not even in Southern California, where there's a saturated market. Now, other beverages like Coke always advertise against Pepsi, and there's no, all the Coke and Pepsi drinkers in the world are kind of already in one camp or the other. But with kombucha, it's certainly outside of Southern California, or go to the Midwest or go to Europe or South America or Mexico, and there's 99% of people have never even tasted it. So rather than, like you say, point fingers at each other and try and diss each other, it's better to, your kombucha might be more authentic or naturally brewed or non-pasteurized, but providing people can pick, and even if they pick up a bottle or can of kombucha that doesn't taste anything like as good as yours, it's a step. It's providing they don't now never drink kombucha again. And I use the analogy, I've mentioned wine a couple of times, but with beer, my wife's from Ireland, and nobody, I don't think, in the world began drinking beer by chugging a pint of Guinness. Right, you start with a light beer. You start with what in England is called a shandy, where you mix soda and beer together. And in England, you start drinking at 16 or something. Here, it's illegal under 21, but who knows how many I've never drunk before 21. But you then gradually explored, and the craft beer industry is very much the big brother, big sister of the kombucha industry. And there's been an explosion of 8,000 craft beer brewers in the US. And so beer drinkers start with a light beer and then they get more sophisticated. And I think that can apply to kombucha.
1,000%. It's really, and that's why I think there's a kombucha for everyone. You need people to just start drinking the kombucha, because what happens is then they crave those profiles. And as their bodies start to, clear out some of those excess sugars from the other beverages they've been drinking, they start to want those more sour kombuchas. And I've definitely heard and seen that progression from many folks. But speaking of the future, looking ahead, what do you see? What do you envision for the future of kombucha, both as a industrial beverage, as a manufactured product, as well as where it can fit into the psyche of the future?
Well, I'm not. I don't have a crystal ball, and I don't know what the adoption cycle of new things is. I mean, you can look at something like yogurt, which is, we're probably all both of an age where as children, hardly anybody ate it. And now you go into a supermarket and there's 50 varieties of Greek and natural and flavored and so on. And so it could easily, occupy more and more shelf space in more and more different retail outlets. Being a home brewer, I'm fondly hoping that it's so easy to make. I mean, it takes me 15 minutes a week to boil. I just did it last night, boiled up 2 gallons of water with the tea bag in the nut bag and put my 2 cups of sugar in. I'm letting it cool. I'll refill my continuous brew containers and got a little heating pad and check the temperature every now and again. And then I've got 2 gallons for the cost of 2 pints. I mean, it's like 2 cents a bottle, not 5 cents a bottle, not $5 a bottle. And I mean, not everybody's set up. People don't have homes where they can. I've got space in my
You can't
garage.
make everything all the time, right? But for
No,
those who
so
do have that passion, it's really
yeah.
inexpensive and it's super easy to do.
Yeah, so I can see a larger number of home brewers. I can see. I like to think about what you can call the long tail of kombucha industry. There's always, like in this country, you're not going to see GTs from the shelves. He's got the distribution networks locked in, and Health Aid and him maybe fight over some shelf space in a big multi-chain, whatever they call them, multi-outlet chain, Costco's or Walmart. But I believe firmly that people can make. I mean, I've never done the hard work of brewing kombucha, and it does require some investment if you're going to do it at all beyond just for a few friends. You need some larger containers. You need a dedicated space that's been certified by the health department. But it's not rocket science. And then you can be the like with the craft beer brewer. You can create your own. Like when I was in Greece, I talked to a young couple who are taking herbs and herbal plants from the Greek islands and infusing those in kombucha, which will be unique in the world. It'll be available to people to consume in that region. There can be kombucha made from spring water. I talked to a guy in Valle de Bravo, west of Mexico City. I just profiled him on Balisana kombucha, and he gets his water from a deep spring well, a deep well water, and that. I think ancient Chinese emperors used to have a special spring for the emperor's tea. So there can be lots of nuances and lots of creativity and variation in kombucha, both in any given region. It can be a great regional. You can have, like you have cheese, right? You have Wisconsin. Well, I'm from Cheshire in England, so you have Cheshire cheese. You have Stilton. You have, they say in France, there's 500 different regional cheeses, and I can see that being a very rich, both for the taste buds, but also a very income-producing alternative for the small mom and pop companies who can learn the business and refine it. And I think it can be a profitable enterprise for people who don't want to work for a big corporation like I did. I didn't mind it, but if I was 25 years younger, I'd probably want to start my own kombucha company.
Well, when I tell people, because I'm a consultant to many companies, we also provide wholesale culture. So, we've been the source for many brands, both national and small. And you know it's a labor of love, emphasis on the labor, so you have to be willing
Mm-hmm.
to put in the effort. And if you do, I think there is this, that's what I love about kombucha. There's a lower barrier to entry than some other types of food businesses you might go into. And it's kombucha is not an endpoint, it's a portal. So even with the GTs, the national brands we've seen, they're also doing aqua kefir, or they're doing cocoa yogurt, or coconut, non-dairy yogurts. And and so it becomes this, or tapaches, right? So it becomes this hub of creating a wide variety of fermented foods and beverages
Mm-hmm.
that everybody can use. Hex ferments in Baltimore, right? They have their sauerkrauts and
Oh yeah.
kimchi's, and they have their own whole supermarket of wonderful fermented foods. And then you start collaborating with people who not only want fermented foods, they want bone broths, they want more traditional types of food. So it really can be this lovely way to create a community of people who desire health from the inside out. And I think that as we understand more about the human microbiome, and even as we see more of these human trials on kombucha validating what people have been saying for hundreds, thousands of years about it, that she's just going to keep registering into the consciousness. And that's why we have a World Kombucha Day, right? We invented World Kombucha Day in order to
Right.
celebrate this beautiful culture, and to help her be seen and heard by more and more people. So thank you so much, Ian, for being here today. I'd love to help people find where you are. How can people find Ian Griffin on the interwebs and whatnot?
Yeah, it's very straightforward. It's Booch News, BOOCHNEWS.com. And I've got companion Instagram, Facebook, X, or Twitter. I don't use that much anymore, but you'll find Booch News. There's links to those social media uh, on the homepage. And I will also mention on the homepage, there's the worldwide directory. And if anybody's listening to this, they know of a kombucha that I haven't included on the worldwide directory, a commercial brand of even a small one, please email ian@boochnews.com, ian@boochnews.com. And yeah, I'm looking forward to hopefully resurrecting Symbiosis when the
Yes.
time's right with KBI and publishing more copies. And I'd encourage people on Booch News, if you just search for the Symbiosis, you can find the links to order back copies that take you straight to MagCloud. And I know that KBI have links for that as well.
Yes, and we're giving some issues away, so definitely join our giveaway, and you could be the winner of some Symbiosis Magazine. It's a wonderful magazine. We did it in collaboration with BrewLogix. They were our publishing partner who did all of this beautiful graphic design. So grateful to have that. Literally, many people coming together to create this magazine, and I'm also so grateful that you do the worldwide directory. Before Kombucha Camp had an online store, we just were a blog with a few PayPal buttons. And I did the same. I collected every single kombucha brand I could find. And obviously, we don't do that at Kombucha Camp anymore. So I'm grateful that you are carrying on the torch of being a repository for brands from all across the globe. So thanks again, Ian. So appreciated having you here today. And we'll raise a glass and toast to you.
Thanks, Hannah. It's been